TheFrXion here, or Tiger Tank 1-2, however you call me, I don't really care, and welcome back to World of Tanks. Today I have a map guide for you guys on the map Karelia, and this time around it's going to be a pretty one-sided affair, but still, we're going to take a look at what makes this map great, how you should play it, and especially with a focus on a heavy tank, a super heavy tank, the TheFrXion at tier 9, and how you want to play it with this map. So before, I know some people of you really dislike it when I pause, but before we're going to be taking a look at the gameplay, we're going to take a look, or at least a closer look, at how this map is set up. It is a very, very standard World of Tanks or Wargaming kind of style map. You have the part in the north where medium tanks or faster vehicles are supposed to brawl it out. You have the middle part where light tanks have a lot of foliage where they can actually spot enemy tanks at the very beginning of the match. Then you have the southern part of the map where you actually have a hill where both sides can actually get into the action and where the heavy tanks can brawl it out. All the places here usually are not completely already safe, except if you're right here on this side and you have to engage the team on the north, or if you're here on this side and you have to engage the team on the south. But at the same time over here, you're not really safe from the northern part, and over here you're not really safe from the northern part. You're actually a bit more safe from the northern part, from the north, than from the team of the south, if you're sitting back there. So okay, that was a bit far up right there. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at this map. We're going to be obviously taking a closer look at how we won this game or lost this game, depending on the outcome of the battle, afterwards on the map viewer. And what you can see right here is the middle. I like to call this middle a bit of the death zone. It's a bit of a swamp, right? And it looks really cool. And it has quite a bit of bushes that you can use as a light tank. What I like to do when I'm playing a light tank on this map is I like to, if I'm starting from the north, I like to be aggressive and get all the way over here into maybe one of those bushes right here. Because especially if you get like into this bush right here, you get a little bit of coverage from this side as well, that when vehicles tend to go over here from the southern base, that you don't get immediately spotted. But before I rush into this position, I like to play a little bit more defensively in the light tank. Sit right here, see if I can spot anything going up here, or any of the light tanks, you know, trying to get over here, or trying to get to the hill from a direct route. That's where your team can actually get some early shots in, and the same is what I like to do on the opposite side. But I think that this side here has a little bit more of a leeway, because the spawn over there is not immediately set right next to the place where you get to the north, but over here your spawn is very, very close, and it's very, very flat if you want to go to the north. So it's a bit more risky if you're coming from the northern base down and you're trying to spot right here. But it's also a bit more rewarding because usually there are not a lot of tanks milling around here, right here, but in the base at the back. So moving on. If we're playing a heavy tank, especially a slower heavy tank with a lot of armor, I like to play this a very, very aggressive spot. Just push right through here, maybe go to the hill, and then sit at this corner. Because what ends up happening on the northern side right here is that tank destroyers will like to hide behind here, sit right there, and if you don't get close enough, you will not be able to spot them, and they'll just do a lot of damage to you. That is why you have to be aggressive, and also with the cost of a bit of HP. But if we take a look at our current constellation, because this is also going to be very important, there's no artillery, first and foremost. We have quite a few tier 8 vehicles, we are top tier, and we have quite a few tier 9 medium tanks. We actually have 3 tier 9 medium tanks and a very fast T10, which is a heavy, but still kind of goes into the medium heavy range. We have a couple of tank destroyers that will probably sit at base, so we have the perfect setup to rush down the south with a couple of fast tanks and some heavy vehicles, and have some of the tank destroyers sitting in the base, and maybe some of the medium tanks going up north, while being supported by the tank destroyers in the back. So let's see how we will go down this road. When you're playing a super heavy tank, you'll notice that it takes you a while to get to a position. It's one of the reasons why I don't like to play heavy tanks, or super heavy tanks for that matter of fact, because I like to be flexible. There are sometimes situations where you will need to change the flank to be able to support your team better. And that only works if you have the mobility to get there. And I would sacrifice armor for mobility any day in this game, because mobility is going to save your life much more. It's better armor than, armor for itself. Because when you can run, you can outrun them. But if you have the armor, they can just switch over to high explosive anti-tank ammunition and they can dish you through. But still, very important role. Nonetheless, heavy tanks are important, and we should definitely have a balance of both. Now, if you look at the current setup of the map and how my team is playing this, you notice that our medium tanks were very aggressive at the get-go. They rushed the hill very early on, and we have the northern part as well. So that means that they have a lot of tanks bunched up around the mountain here in the south, and probably a lot of tank destroyers sitting back in the base trying to shoot at something in the middle. And what you can see right here is, if we just pause it real fast, I'm sorry about that, but this is very, very important. This is essential to why this is so important to map control. Right here, we have in this bush a M41 90 GF Walker Bulldog, or the Black Dog. And they have a WZ over here. And as I mentioned previously, the WZ was trying to spot the middle, probably spotted some of our tanks crossing, maybe not, maybe he did. And he did spot the SU-100 trying to get up the hill, but now he's been spotted. And you can see he's going to get knocked out pretty damn quickly in just a second by several tanks that are guarding the middle on our side. And this is where they lose kind of the map control in the middle. This is basically where they've lost this game completely. They didn't push the north enough, they didn't push the south enough. They're in a very defensive state, and they're in pretty much disarray at the moment. The middle part has been dominated by us, so we can actually interchange without being shot between the north, the middle, and the south. And this is actually what all the wargaming cards maps are like, right? It's basically you have 3 ways, and you have to control at least 2 to be able to overcharge the other one. If you control 2, you usually win the game, but if you only control one part of the map, you have to have a really good defensive strategy, or a really good communications in your team. So what you can see right here is, I noticed that they don't have a lot of tanks in the north or the middle, so I try to put pressure on them by pushing the south right here with my superior armor and my HP. I have 2,300 HP that I can use to keep them from going back to the north and reinforcing those parts. At this point, the enemy team is probably already falling apart. People will start complaining, bitching and all that stuff. But this is where, where they could have maybe still turned something around at maybe a minute before, where they saw, oh, we have the hill under our control. Maybe they should fall back to the base. We have no artillery. Basically, what they need is a tank to spot for them, and what they need at the same time is just tanks that do knock out our vehicles. That is very important. If you're down like by 5 tanks, you have to start taking out some of the vehicles on the enemy team to alleviate some of your flanks. That, what you can see right here, is going to be a very, very easy game now, because our middle is going to start moving in from the back right here. Our north is keeping them pinned to the north right there. We have only lost 1 vehicle. Our south, with me included, we're putting pressure on them. We are keeping 5 tanks currently stranded right here, and now the north is, or the middle part is coming around. They're knocking out those guys from the back. They're putting out the tank destroyers that are sitting right here, and this is basically GG. That's how you clock, or how you you know, turn over an entire side in less than 5 minutes. And that's something that I've noticed in the past very frequently, is that enemy teams break apart very, very quickly. At least there are less long games where the victory is based on like 1 or 2 vehicles, and more of the, you know, lemming rush, where you just push through very quickly. The game gets decided in a very short amount of time, and you manage to grab the win or grab the loss in less than maybe 6 minutes or 5 minutes. This time around it's about 6 minutes, 5 minutes in, and we win. 2000 damage, 2000 damage blocked, 714 assistance damage. That's okay for a super heavy tank. We could have done more. We could have used more of our HP, maybe pushed a little bit earlier, but if we would have done that, we probably would have been knocked out by someone. And this is how we get a very quick and easy win. So if we look at this map real fast, I am going to be honest, and I am going to be saying that the north is a bit more unbalanced than the south. They lost this game because they had too many vehicles that were central, or that were sitting centrally, and that were sitting in the south. They didn't really want to push the south. We were very aggressive from the get-go. We had 4 tanks rushing the hill very early on. We had 2 heavy tanks moving in very quickly after the mediums rushed the hill. And what you were able to see was that with the heavies that they had, AMX 5120, an AMX M451, and an Object 257, which I don't really know where it is. It's probably somewhere in the north, knocked out. Let's just see if we can inspect the wreckage over here. Because in the minimap we can see that there's a tank right here. It's probably the Object 257. Because I cannot see it anywhere else. Right over here is Centurion. Yeah. What they needed to do was to push one of the flanks, at least with a bit of numbers. They didn't push the south, they didn't push the north, they didn't push the middle, but this also has to do with how this game is balanced, at least in numbers of tanks that they were getting. Those vehicles that they had, obviously the AMX 5120 isn't going to be able to take the middle by itself. It's more or less a supporting heavy tank that is fast, but if you don't have enough medium tanks, they had 2 tier 9 medium tanks, we had 3 tier 9 medium tanks, and a couple of fast tier 8 medium tanks, which all knew what they were doing. They decided to push the hill very early on, and they brought no one to the hill. They didn't contest the hill at all. We had control over the middle after that. They were able to actually shoot at the tanks in the north, so anyone who would try to go back through the south to the north would have to take the long road all the way to Cap, all the way over here, then to the north. At that point they would have already been overrun very quickly, so they had no real option. The hill right here is obviously a very important part to controlling the south and the middle, but the hill can also be countered if you have a very good light tank in the middle right here. The WZ did die because he was outspotted by the M41. And if that WZ would have been over here more, he would have been able to actually spot some of them if they wouldn't have, if they would have shot through the bushes. And some of the tank destroyers that were sitting back here, that were out in the open when they died, they would have been more effective in their quest to hold the middle. So there are a lot of factors involved when winning and losing such a match. I think most of it can be attributed to the tank selection, how Matchmaker puts them together, the tank skills or player skills, as you can see right here. My team was very experienced. They knew where to go, they knew how to do it, they knew why and when to push. and obviously map control. And map control this time around, if they would have pushed to north with sizable forces, let's say most of the heavy tanks, or at least the AMX, the 257, the Centurion, the T-54, and maybe a fast tank destroyer such as none of them, and some of the tier 8 medium tanks, they would have been able to overwhelm this force and maybe had the light tank right there spot the hill, because what we would have had to do then was go back to defend the base and maybe divert our forces to go down here to their base. And, you know, they would have been able to hold this position with tank destroyers, because they had quite a few, and they would have been able to knock them out. But this is obviously a dream scenario, dream concept. This is what you do before the battle. You prepare with your team, and that obviously doesn't work. This is randoms. This is how people play their game, and they're not here for a strategy lesson, but we are. And we're going to take a real fast look at how this map played out tactically, and then we're going to have a little bit of a verdict. So we're finding ourselves back on StratSketch. I'm going to put the link in the description box below so you guys can check it out for yourself if you want to use it. It's pretty nice. I don't play Clan Wars anymore, but we used to use different map tactics, you know, for all the tactics. And yeah, I think StratSketch wasn't around back then, but it's pretty damn nice. So we're going to place a couple of vehicles real fast at the deciding moment when this game was actually won, at least in my opinion. We're gonna not have the average, you know, numbers of vehicles that we had. I'm not gonna put like 15 tanks around here. I'm just gonna put some of the tanks to make it exemplary to what this game was like, just to show you guys what I meant with this. I think this is a pretty accurate description on how this game went around. So this was actually the setup we had after the very first minute of the game. This right here, just going to right here. Can I draw, please? That would be awesome. Okay, that's that's the wrong one. Undo. I'm sorry, I haven't used it in a while. Wow, I really don't know what I'm doing. Okay, this right here, lead item. This right here is me, right? This was my tank, and it was taking me a while to get there. I took this route because I spawned right here, and this usually don't get hit early on, except if they have a really aggressive scout and they have some really aggressive medium tanks that do decide to go to the middle very early on. But what ended up happening was when the enemy team decided to set up, they sent a couple of vehicles, a lot of vehicles down in the south, because they knew that the south part is going to be very interesting, very important for them. And they didn't decide to go into the, or contest the mountain area, the hill area. Now, if you look at the hill area right here, you can see that it provides vision for the entirety of the map in the middle, at least in the sense of the middle, and maybe all the way to here. That's max view range, I think. And you have some pretty good insights to the enemy base. So if those tanks right here get spotted by someone over here, they can actually fire at them very, very easy and very, very quickly, so without a problem. So what ended up happening was we contested the hill very well because of very experienced players, fast medium tanks that banded together. They were willing to take the risk to get hit by several tanks if they decided to push or counter push them. But there was no artillery, so they didn't have to fear any unwelcome surprises when they were on the hill and getting spotted maybe over here. So artillery wouldn't be able to hit them because there was no artillery. This light tank, this M41, played it very smart. He decided to spot the middle, give us the view. He allowed us to see all of this, like all of this. Okay, maybe not there, maybe, but right here at this bush, and if he moved around a little bit, he might see that as well. So those are the vision lines that he has. And this is maybe the vision that this guy has right here. Maybe, I'm not sure if he was able to see the hill, but since he was behind this rock, I think he was able to see the hill, but it's very far away. And if you take a look at my team, they have a lot of foliage to protect them from getting spotted outright unless they do fire through. And the basic idea of the enemy light tank was actually not too bad. He was spotting the hill if they would actually fire through the bushes, he would spot them and he would allow these guys in the back to actually engage them on the hill. But since our scout was a lot more active, a lot more aggressive here, he was able to outspot the WZ. Maybe the WZ did fire through the bushes and he got spotted. And because we had the control of the hill, the scout didn't stand a chance to survive because there were several different vehicles aiming right at him, and he was basically dead in a very short amount of time. So they lost the eyes in the middle, which made those tank destroyers in the back panic by quite a bit. Because obviously, if you don't see what's going on in the middle, you're going to be the next one being spotted. So they probably decided to fall back or just stay there and die. So you had like a middle force that was completely useless because they didn't see anything and they died very early on. So the southern part, because there were only two medium tanks, two tier 8s, they didn't decide to push the hill because they didn't feel confident enough. We had two tier 9 medium tanks in the north. They didn't push through because they didn't feel confident enough with the amount of tanks they had. We had 3 or 4 tanks over here. They had 3 or 4 tanks over here, so it was actually a balanced game. But they allowed us to get into the aggressive spot very early on, and since there's no artillery, and since they don't control the middle or any part right here, they weren't able to actually engage the guys in A1 or B1, B2, A1, A2, because they didn't decide to push. They were only able to engage them if they push through, and you can only push through if you have enough numbers, and they didn't have that. So they actually waited in the north for reinforcements that never came. In the south, they waited for our inevitable push that came. And they were hoping that maybe they would be able to take us out one by one if we did push. But since obviously my vehicle right here is a very, very heavy tank, I was able to just bind them around here. And we were able to take them out one by one very quickly. Those were the very first tanks that died in the south. Then they lost a heavy tank, the AMX. Then they lost the tank destroyer, and so forth and so on. So on and so forth. Yeah, exactly. I think it's that way around. So right here. But the game ending move, or basically the move that made us win the game was, that's the wrong color, was our medium tanks being able to push behind them because they were able to take out the tank destroyers earlier. So they took out the tank destroyers by the vision of the M41. They knocked them out. Then they moved around, came over here. I had those guys completely interested in me. Then I knocked one of them out. I moved up. The T10 moved up while he was providing pressure on those guys. They were dead very, very early on. And the last enemies to fall on the enemy team were the guys in the north. They had no assistance, and when we were able to clean up the southern part, they were basically just sitting ducks. So if you look at this with a final verdict, you can say that because they didn't dare to move onto any flank with a sizable amount of units, or they didn't put up any real resistance in, you know, taking those specific positions that were very important, very essential, especially the hill over here, especially the middle part over here, and essentially this part here, which did bind them for long enough for us to engage them from over here. They did lose quite quickly. They lost in the first 2 minutes of the match because of the matchup, because of the inexperience, and because of the very bad positioning. So that's how you win very quickly, and that's why you lose very quickly from time to time. What could have they done? Well, my only thought, if they would have played the defensive role, they could have had tank destroyers over here. They could have still had the heavy tanks right here, right? But maybe no medium tanks, or maybe something right here, and they could have had some of the vehicles in those ditches. But to be fair, I don't really see them, you know, being successful because they didn't really have the scout, they didn't have the vision, and since we controlled the hill and the middle, it's so difficult to actually do anything against this and this at the same time. But if they would have maybe concentrated fire, if they had the tank destroyers further up, they would have been maybe able to actually take out some of us. And the only reason, if they, like, when we split our forces into two groups right here and right here, and we started pushing from both sides, the only way they maybe would have been able to survive is maybe if they start pushing us while they were coming around the corner and have the support from these guys back there and knock us two out, and then maybe redirect their forces to the guys that are coming in from the middle. I've seen such strategies happen from time to time, but they don't always work, especially if you don't have real communications. So yeah, that is the what if scenario that didn't happen, and we steamrolled them, and it had to do with several factors. Yeah, this is how you win Karelia. Karelia is a very simple map. It doesn't really take a lot. You have to contest the middle. You have to contest, you know, the hill. You have to contest the middle. You have to contest the north. At least divert your forces into one direction. You have to stay at the base as well, right? Because if someone comes through, you have to have a little bit of protection. But I think the south is just so much more important than north. But a lot of people kind of ignore the south now because it's just such a huge killing field that you can actually move through the north and just get to the base right through there. Yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, as always, comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.